Welcome to the Dividend Talk podcast, episode 200. The power of consistent dividend growth investing, lessons from 200 episodes of Dividend Talk. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, Dividend Talk is the place to be for insights, analysis, and unsalted advice on how to make the most of your money through dividends with our own unique European flavour. I'm your co-host, Engineer My Freedom, and today I am joined by European eDGI. So sit back, relax, and join us as we dive into the world of dividend investing and discover the power of passive income. Here we are, European eDGI, our 200th episode. How about that?
It's amazing. Come on, hey, we're known for the vodka, so I think we have to drink on it. Did you take anything with you?
Of course I did. I have vodka.
Ooh, okay.
What else would we have?
No, good. Okay, so come on, cheers. 200 episodes, my friend. It's really, really well deserved.
Yeah,
Let's
cheers.
let it taste. I love it. I love it.
You can't beat it. You can't beat a podcast. You just can't beat it.
No. Come on, and those dividends need to be spent, right?
Every now and again, it has to be spent. But come on, 200 episodes. I mean, we have loads of questions from our listeners in around the 200 episodes. We have questions from ourselves and a little bit of a reflection back on our 200 episodes before we get into our main topic. And I suppose Thomas has gave us a nice question. He said, relate to the 200 episode. Would you mind sharing a few words? How did it all start? Did it click immediately? And how did you end up recording this podcast together?
Yeah, it's really funny actually, and I think we also elaborated this on the 100th, on number 100 here. So Thomas, I really recommend also to listen to the first 100. But let's assume you listen to all of them. It's always a nice story to call back. I think it was somewhere during COVID, right? It's in COVID we were all locked up from March, not knowing what to do. I was blogging. I was actually, just starting to hang around a bit on Twitter, and I got in touch with you, right, Derek? You had like 2,000 followers. I was so impressed, like, whoa, he has got a lot of folks following him, and I was probably having 100 or 90 or something like that. So, from that point of view, you were for me really a big guy, as such, because that's how it goes. I always respect the people that are just joining. You will see on Twitter as well. I follow more than 1,000 people. It doesn't matter whether you're big or small. If you have something interesting to say, I follow you, and I kind of learned that from you as well, because when you're a small account, it's quite sometimes a barrier to reach out to someone bigger. But hey, we got to chat. It was really really nice to chat with you. And at a certain moment, I said, like, okay, why don't we go online one time, right? And just have a chat via Google or via Teams. I don't know. What were you using actually at the time?
It must have been Google Meet.
Google or Zoom, maybe.
It was Zoom. The first one
was Zoom. It was Zoom, yeah. And then when we were after an hour talking or something like that, we hang up, and before we hang up, we said something like, hey, this is cool. Maybe we should record ourselves once. Yeah, and that's what we did, right? The next time we even called it episode 0 because we had no clue about it. And I remember we were both a bit nervous. We didn't even know if people would ever listen. I remember the editing, like every was taken out of it. It took me hours to edit it, right?
Yeah, I remember that. My wife, because I had my door open and she was watching me, and I was sitting up straight, like really straight sitting up, and just everything was robotic. It just felt unnatural. It was quite funny actually looking back, but I think we settled into it quite quickly afterwards.
Yes, and the most interesting one is that people actually listening to it.
Yeah, remember getting our first 100 listeners.
Yes. I was really, really impressed that 100 people wanted to listen to us, to our talking, to our conversations. So, yeah, that's how it started, and from there, we just continued to go. Right? It's like if you every time put a step forward, in the end you'll walk a mile, and afterwards miles, and you get somewhere. So I think that's what we've been doing with no end in sight.
Exactly. No expectations and no end in sight. I think that's the one thing that connected us together. We weren't doing this to make money, to scam people, to anything like that. It was just two people wanted to share our passion. And if anyone wanted to join along, then that was all part. That was all fun. So,
and this is also the reason why we always ask questions for the listeners, right? Because it's really from the community for the community. I know we're the co-hosts. That's why we also try to have guests on. We don't mind guests that have limited experience. If anyone has an interesting story to say, then reach out to us, and you might be on the podcast one day. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. But tell me then, what was your most memorable moment?
Well, it must have been when I was in Ireland, when we had the first official podcast. I remember sitting both behind the same mic, because, we couldn't have two mics because of the echoing, because we don't use a podcast studio. And I remember that I think we did 4 or 5 shots in that episode, and I did feel a bit tipsy along the way. It was so funny. It was so funny. I think when people were listening, they heard all the time the glasses like cling. And another vodka.
That was so funny, because we're so used to recording, obviously, separately in our own spaces. We never thought about how it would work when we were together. We said, we just jump together or sitting around in my kitchen, and we realized pretty quickly how big of a pain it was to try and get that to work together. So that was quite fun. But yeah, that was my most memorable moment as well. I think that was. We were 2-3 years into the podcast. We've never met in person before that, and then we finally got to meet. So that was a good weekend.
And it was sponsored by our listeners and such, because I had a goal to collect €800 to be able to buy a ticket to Ireland. They were not cheap, and the cost related to it. And I got, for this whole year, I got, like, via Buy Me a Coffee, many coffees from the people to get us there. This was so awesome, right? It was totally sponsored by the listeners to get us together.
Yeah,
that's why I love our followers. It's amazing because they made this happen, right? I really respect that.
Yeah. And then what about your show then? What's your favorite show? I think Kevin Parody has asked us, which of the previous 199 episodes is your personal favorite and why?
Well, we did a few where we had live guests on. I mean, I really wanted it also to do it tonight, but I'm out next weekend. That's why we are recording this already on the Sunday evening, while it gets released next weekend. But for instance, there for episode 177 around New Year, we did a live show about our Q4 performance. And then so nice, there are like 10 to 20 people in there. They're asking questions. You can see them. I love those the most. So those are definitely one of the most favorites for me.
Yeah, I think my one has to be our first meeting with Ian Lopuck. At the time, it's so funny. You mentioned earlier that I had 2,000 followers and sort of a big fish, but I felt that when we met him, he was so big, he had so many followers. He was such a cool, nice guy. I thought it was a great episode. And actually, I remember we had to cut that in half. We spoke for so long, and it was like 2.5 hours of us just chatting and talking, and that was my personal favorite. It was our first big guest, I remember, and I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, see him on YouTube, but he was incredible. And of course, he's been on the show since, and I'm sure he'll be on again in the future. But yeah, one of my favorites is
and this is also interesting, right? Because also over the years we have built confidence. In the beginning, it was like, oh, a big guest, but now I have a feeling that there's no guest that's too big for the show.
Yeah,
and I don't say this out of arrogance, but I have now confidence that we're having fun, and I what I've seen from all the guests, they're just like us to some extent. One is a little bit smarter, the other one is more consistent, the other one has a better job and can invest more. But in the end, these are just usually normal people, but they are just having a large following or something like that. And that's because they know how to do that and they spend time on that. Yeah. But they are not necessarily better than anyone else. And that's the interesting thing about this.
What I've noticed with them all that we've had on that have some, I'm going to say, relative success in terms of the social media presence or their business in terms of that, they're all very, very passionate on what they do, because we speak to them obviously offline, off air before we go online. Then normally we stay and chat afterwards. And I don't think we've met a guest yet that has not been passionate.
Well, okay, he has the passion, but I felt like he's only here for his branding. And this was this guy from YouTube who looks like a car salesman.
Mr. Bowtie?
Yes. Yeah.
I grant you, but he was still. I felt
he had a lot of passion. That's true.
I felt he had a lot of passion, but
but I didn't feel connection.
He was more geared towards commercializing, and but I've no issue with that. But I still felt the passion from him. But I get your point. But on that, then, who was your favorite guest?
Well, actually, I mean, you mentioned Ian Lopuk already, and I knew that you would say that. So for me, it was Cameron Stewart, Mr. Cashflow. Why? Because when he mentioned about that he went to the bank or something like that for Meta, for Facebook at the time, and if Facebook would be at 100 or 150, he would go to the bank, borrow all the cash he could get, and throw it all into Meta. And you looked at him in the eye, you looked him in the eyes, and you knew this guy is bloody real. Yeah, there's no fooling around with him. He means this. Yeah. And the conviction he had, it made quite an impression on me, I must say. And then I like really this guy. He's a nice example. I think like he's not a dividend growth investor, but he's more like a cash flow investor. I would recommend everyone to follow his YouTube. You really learn a lot from him. But speaking with him and then hearing him talking about his conviction about Facebook made quite a strong impression on me. And for that reason, he was probably my favorite guest. But also, like more recently, our Canadian investor and the other one from Canada, Bob Lai as well. I mean, we had a lot of good guests.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard.
It's hard to choose because it's like kind of almost choosing between your children, right? Who's your favorite? You can't really say that. But we had a lot of, I mean, Thiago, Alan, Mike, the Kleine Kapitalists, really friends of the show that also sometimes when one of us can't be available, they're always ready to jump on. Yeah, this is just amazing. It's amazing. And they all have a story to tell.
Yeah, which is great. And I'm so glad you mentioned them. They're like the OGs from us. We had Dividend Wave in there as well. There's so many. We still have that group. I'm not as active on Twitter, so I'm not as active in that group as much as I'd like. But the OGs are still there, and like you said, we do appreciate that they can jump in and help when either one of us are out. But let's talk about some of our quotes.
You didn't tell me what your favorite guest is, Dr. Ian Lopuk.
My favorite guest. It was recently the Canadian dividend investor. I did like his attitude towards it. But I liked when we had Matthias on, our very first CEO of a company, public limited company that is trading on a stock exchange, come onto a show. And what a humble, nice guy as well, and gave lots of nuggets. And I think it helped you with your conviction on the farmer as well, because you're.
Yeah, definitely. I that's the time you can watch someone in the eyes. You can actually see with the non-verbal communication if they are fooling you or not. Yeah.
So I think he might be my favorite guest. Just having just that very first CEO of a company sitting on our podcast, it was a nice feeling, I have to say.
Yeah. And then we get a lot of questions from listeners, right? Yes. Who typically stand out for you? And I know we have many listeners, so again, if you don't call out someone's name, that's okay, right? We're not here to offend people or to make people feel bad, but just also from an appreciation point of view, who usually stands out for you?
Yeah, there's so many, but look, we get these nice emails from Ron from time to time. They're fantastic. He's traveling all over Europe. Sometimes I'm jealous of all the pictures he sent in, but absolutely love him because he's living the dream of being retired early and actually being able to travel around. So really a great source of inspiration. But Tim Ainley always comes up with, he's normally number one with the questions that comes up. We've got, put me on the spot now. I can't remember so many. We've got Martin, because I always pronounce the names wrong, you see. So it stick out to me.
Yeah. Now, and that also, what is funny, you mentioned Ron, but did you know that Ron and Chuck Mariolis they're on our Facebook group, the only ones with the status retired early. So we have a special status on Facebook. If you're not there yet, it's the Dividend Talk Facebook group. You can probably easily find it, but I'll also add it to the description of the podcast. But we have 3.2 thousand members there on Facebook group. It's quite active, and I mean, it goes with ebb and flows, right? Usually around earnings seasons, dividend hikes, it's much more active. But it's really nice to see how people are helping each other out. For instance, this week there was a post about stocks from Romania, and people are discussing it. It's really awesome to see, because that's why we have this podcast, right? For the European community, to help each other out and to inspire each other. But there are 2 people, therefore, with a retired early stage and status. And if you are listening now and you are also already retired and you're on the Facebook group, ping us. We'll give you the status, because we think that's the ultimate badge that someone can have. But it comes at a responsibility. Thou shalt teach the others how to get there. That's the only expectations. Be a good citizen in this Facebook group and teach others, because many of us are on the journey and it's not an easy one. You know that. So that's the only expectation. But for me, I mean, Alan. I mean, he's great. Yeah, he has a system. He has I don't know how many hundreds of stocks, but he has a system. He puts his in the weekend always his buy orders ready. He just buys them based on a combination of yield, classification. I mean, we have a whole episode by it. It took us 4 years to get him on the podcast, but he got there to finally explain it. But also others like Alex, who was also moderated together with Tim Ainley, right, Alexander? Yeah. But then we have Patrick, Lars Erik, Miłosz, Adrian, and one that I always really enjoy reading is Ron Kingping. Special call out to him, shout out to him, because the other time he put a nice picture on there. He looks like a rocker. I think it was his granddaughter with him. And for me, this gives us a bit of a personal touch. And so for me, the Facebook group, I mean, it's not my family because my family is living here in the house, but it's a strong community. I really feel passionate around it. And I mean, all of these have been over the years asking questions and many more. I mean, we see it, right? So we miss still dozens of people, but guys, even if you're not heard, still our appreciation. I think this question and answer section makes this podcast so special, I think, specifically for ourselves as well as host.
100%. And then lastly, what about some quotes that we are known for? Nobody can know European DGI without knowing the phrase, bankers are wankers.
Yes, of course. I think I'm known for that because of my opinion about banking stocks. And I have a t-shirt of it. And people that saw me probably when we had the dividend day in Frankfurt where we met together, I was walking close to the European Central Bank with a black t-shirt and white letters on it, bankers are wankers. And I felt the king of the city. I really felt the king of the city.
I remember that episode when that news broke about SBC Bank when they collapsed, and you were coming around with your typical banker speech, and beforehand you were like, oh, I have some jokes. Let's tell some jokes in the podcast. I was like, okay. You must have spent about 45 minutes before the podcast just going, oh wait, I have another one, and telling me all these jokes. It was so funny.
Yeah, I think there's a whole episode. I think people should look at that. But indeed, I have about 10 bankers jokes or something like that throughout this episode.
Halfway through the episode, you'd think of another one, and you'd stop in the middle of what you're saying and tell the joke, and then go back to what you're saying. Oh, it was quite funny.
Yeah, and the other one is you can't borrow conviction. I've got also a hoodie with that, a black hoodie. So we had for some time this merchandise that you could buy. So I bought myself at the time also the Bankers are Wankers shirt, and then the hoodie with you can't borrow conviction. Yeah. So those are, I think, the two that many people of us know us for.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So then for me, I wanted, Derek, based also on this episode 200, I wanted to run a small quiz with you. I want to test your knowledge.
Okay.
So tell me, what is our most popular episode out of the 199?
I would say it's a recent one, I would say. And we did one on why dividend growth investing is the best or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's number 2. You were almost correct. The number one is Realty Income Business Breakdown, under $60 or something like that.
Wow, we did that. We did that a long time ago. What episode was that?
I don't know exactly, but it's been always a very popular one because of the timing, I think, also. It was just around the time that the yields were going up, so the share price was going down, and we did a full business breakdown on Realty Income at the time. So by really, really a big one, but a close second is this one that you just mentioned. Okay.
Not a bad start.
So if you think about, because I threw all our titles into ChatGPT, yeah?
Yep.
So based on those 199, what's the most common theme of our episode?
I would say earnings, because we do earnings, 2 or 3 shows a quarter on earnings.
Yes, but generally we have a lot of episodes that are just about dividend aristocrats and dividend stocks.
Yeah.
So when we have some three high yield dividend stocks, or 5 stocks like this, or 10 like that, those are this is the most used, but they're also one of the most popular. It really tells us that our listeners want to be inspired with certain stocks of the moment, let's say.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? We see this also from the blog and wherever. People are often looking for inspiration, not just for the journey, for the knowledge, but also for, okay, I don't know what to buy today. What are these guys interested in at the moment?
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. Which guest on the show had the episode with the most plays?
See, I know this, and again, it's because it's recent. It is the Canadian dividend growth investor.
No. Brett Thomas.
Ah, that must be close then.
Yes, it is close. It is close. Okay. What are the top 5 countries our listeners are coming from?
Okay, for sure, US is number 1. Notice. Okay. UK, I believe, was second.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Germany, Ireland, and Netherlands were close together.
You're so close. It was United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, and Netherlands.
Oh,
Ireland is number 6.
Close.
Yes.
Close. I forgot Spain. It was actually... Spain is our 4th, yeah?
Yeah. We have a lot of Spanish listeners. Always had. It's a great dividend community. And also on Twitter and social media, lots of folks from Spain, and very clever ones. And we had also Eli Snowball and Alberto here as a guest on the show as an example.
Yep.
Last but not least, what percentage of our listeners are female?
Female listeners, I would say 8%.
Yeah, it's close, of course, 5.5%. And this is something that has to change. We need to empower more women to do this as well. I remember, because I think we have a question about this as well. Who was it again? Someone asked us about whether we will get a female on the show. Let me quickly check.
Yes, Dividend MVP.
Okay, Dividend MVP. So yeah, he's asking about this, and he asked, I wonder if you have done any episodes with women investors, female investors. I'm curious how the other gender thinks about balancing dividend growth versus low yield quality and rebalancing. So one time we were close of having a female guest on the show, but this woman was so, I don't even know what word to use for it. But it came down to the fact, like when I asked like something like, and I don't know why it was an insult, but like, hey, maybe we can talk about this a little bit, like how you look at it from that point of view, right? Like, why are men mostly investing? Then she really became aggressive. She was really, I think, such a typical feminist that just lost any sense of reality. And then I said, like, okay, sorry, I don't want you on the show. Yeah, I don't want you on the show. It was just not. It was no fun anymore. I would know for sure we would be in a fight straight away, and I would have never released the show probably.
Yeah.
But we got a recommendation from last week from ex Berliner. Yeah, and we'll reach out to that person. And I only heard good stuff about her, and I hope that in one of the upcoming shows she will be willing to join us. It would be really nice, because we always said we would love to have a woman on the show one time to talk about investing.
And of course, if our listeners know anyone that's interesting, that would be good to come on. We would love to. We'd love to reach out and see if they would like to come on the show also.
Exactly.
Okay, so I didn't do too bad. Maybe 2 correct out of 5.
You've been studying well enough our statistics.
But close enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 200 episodes where we've done nothing but talk about dividends. Surely you must have learned something in those 200 episodes.
Well, first of all, this topic is about the power of consistent dividend growth investing and our lessons here, right? And what I just want to say, when you think about us running an episode, depending on the topic, it can easily take a lot of time to prepare, right? If we do, for instance, 5 stocks of this, it can be easily 2-3 hours preparation for us. It starts already earlier on in the day. And then still like an hour before we start the recording, we're still sharing notes and noting things down, right? Yeah. And other times it may take half an hour if it's something that we can do plain from our head. But I always have this approach, this mindset of taking our listeners really seriously, because they ask so many questions, whether they're beginner or more advanced. There's a lot to learn there, actually. So it also requires, therefore, again, a lot of preparation before the show. And this also requires me to reflect a lot. And this is probably one of the biggest ones where I built my knowledge on, just by listening to others, what really trying to understand what people are really trying to ask. And that's where you really build knowledge from. So from that point of view, you need to see also my answers in this context. Yeah.
Yep.
So one thing I learned because of this podcast, it's actually all about just making less and less and less mistakes going forward. If I see people, for instance, now talking about medical properties trust, before the dividend cut, I saw yield chasing, then the dividend is cut. Then people are often, not everyone, often not cutting their losses. They're trying to clinch on and hoping that the price will recover. Yeah. All of these kinds of things are the mistakes I typically made in the beginning. Yeah. So what I really learned by doing this podcast, by reflecting a lot, therefore, and also seeing the questions coming in, this is probably one of my biggest learnings. It's all about just making less and less mistakes going forward. Examples are Bayer with the litigation. I held on to it's still in my portfolio. Danone. Although I don't see it necessarily as a mistake, it had a small dividend cut, but I did not, it was a mistake compared to my thesis that I wrote down. I expected more growth out of it. But also Tupperware. It was done before my podcast. I knew it already quite a little bit, but I later started to really understand why I made that mistake. Not saying it's a mistake because the price went 60% down, but why did I make this mistake? Because I had to learn via our podcast and all the analysis that you shall not fall in love with a CEO. Of course, I'm in love with Satya Nadella.
Yeah, and part of making mistakes is when you make a mistake, I find it's hard, and myself included, it's hard to admit that you are wrong. I think that's the hardest part. That's why when the dividend is cut or when something goes against you, you find reasons to hold on to that stock. And I feel like I did that with AT&T.
It's confirmation bias.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's hard. AT&T is one, Walgreens is another that sticks out of my memory where I held that, and over time, that's becoming less and less. But I think that's part of it as well. Just admitting, look, I got it wrong. I'm human, and I'm moving on is one lesson that I've definitely learned. And part of that, I'm going to stick with Walgreens and AT&T, but I've learned to stick with strong balance sheets. Forget about everything else for the moment, but strong balance sheets, and you won't go too far wrong. I think anytime I've invested in a company with even half a fragile balance sheet, it's kicked me straight in the ass. So,
and that's a really good example, because you see now of T. Rowe Price.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
zero debt, and it is able to continue paying a dividend therefore, because they could take on some debt if needed, knowing that they are maybe a bit in a low cycle of their business, right?
Yeah, and T. Rowe Price is an interesting one because they're in a competitive market. We know the ETF landscape is changing, but they can afford to maybe invest some money, take on some debt, and move into a different market to compete with the big boys. But stay away from VFC was another one. Remember VFC?
Yeah.
But I cut them long before they cut the dividend because I spotted it. But I had some confirmation bias with Walgreens, I must admit.
Yeah, nice one. Well, actually, if you talk about the balance sheet and if we talk about making less mistakes going forward, I think what I also really started to really realize, it's not so much about valuation, what I often was looking at in the past, because, I've got this, maybe because I'm Dutch, that I want to be always for 10 cents on the first row. But it's all about the dividend safety in the end. It's all about buying companies that spot a safe dividend. And safe dividend is not just a payout ratio. It is like, is it growing the business? It's always about growing bottom line earnings in a sustainable way before the dividend. The dividend is second. And this is always interesting because of social media. We often get bashed by other kind of investors saying that we're stupid to only focus on the dividend. But they don't understand that we're often just as much growth investors as growth investors to that extent. Maybe not in the high growth, but we look for quality businesses. But we just look for those quality businesses that also happen to pay a growing dividend. Yeah, because we like the passive income out of it. We want our income, the dividend income, to pay our bills without needing to sell our shares, because that's one of the biggest weaknesses for me, that I don't know when to sell.
I would say, do you follow Long Equity on Twitter?
I don't know.
Okay, so
I follow more than 1,000 people, but it's not the name that stands out.
But he always posts about these quality stocks. He's not a dividend investor. He focuses on cash flow, but it is the quality compounders is what he's looking at, right? And he posts a list, and the community help him every month of top compounders. And just look at that list. He has it as a picture, and you'll see how many of them are dividend growth companies, but top quality ones with high dividend growth rates. It's insane.
Yeah. There's also Heavy Mode on Twitter once mentioned that over time he just saw that his dividends are coming in while he's focused on all of this kind of stocks. Started also to actually appreciate a little bit the dividends in there. Will not change his mind now, and fair enough. Everyone each their own way to building wealth, but it's funny to hear that then, right?
Yeah. But then hearing you talk about dividend safety, one of my biggest learnings over the last 200 episodes is that I am not a master of valuation. I've read a couple of books, but I mean that doesn't make you a master by any means. And I'm probably reading the same books as every other retail investor out there. You can only learn so much from a book, but I've learned over time that when I try and implement that fully, I tend to focus on crap because they seem cheap, and my
turnaround plays.
Yeah, all this kind of crap. So look, I do still do like a discounted cash flow as my main thing, but I have a set of parameters. But I'm not hard and fast by that. I'm not totally biased by that price. It made me miss out on Microsoft when it was 200, for example, and stuff like that. So valuation is important, but I think you're right. Dividend safety for me, strong balance sheet, strong cash flows coming in are of greater importance to me than valuation at this.
I only look at valuation after I've done all the rest of my homework. And of course, I mean, if a company has a PE of 50, it's not likely that I will ever look at it because it doesn't go through my screener. Yeah, but I always look first at the dividend history, the dividend policy, then at the 3 financial statements. And then I make a conclusion, is the dividend safe? And only after that, I will do a valuation. Yeah, good one. So, there's another one, and that is really like, don't take investment advice from others. Do your own homework. You can't borrow conviction, our famous quote. But do listen to others to understand. So this sounds maybe a bit contradictory. But in the past, when I began, I was buying those stocks that Jason Fieber was buying and some others. It was more than just being inspired by. It was more like, okay, they buy them, must be good. Yeah, this kind of the lazy attitude kind of thing. So that's where I really had to learn, do your own homework. And it's funny because I learned at university already how to read the 3 financial statements. So why wasn't I doing it properly? Yeah, I was looking just at the yield, the PE, the guy buying it, having a nice blog post about it. Okay, let's do it. But then, when shit hit the fan, you don't have conviction. So, and when I think, but at the same time, I do listen to others. We had a few of our listeners often mentioning about Snap-on, and we thought it was something around strap-ons. We were even making jokes about it, right? That was so stupid for me. It was so stupid. Why wasn't I just properly giving it a chance, researching it? And now when listeners come, I really put the stocks in a list. I may not get to it. Yeah, maybe, I've got a list with 50 tickers. Yeah, and when I add one to the top, the other one drops off. But still, I really, really look different at this now.
Yeah, we were really challenged on that. I remember we made that episode and we were joking about it, but maybe for the next 2 or 3 weeks we had, guys, come on, look at this. And then we did,
yeah.
And we were so impressed by it. So yeah, you're right. You can listen to others, but you cannot borrow conviction, as we always say. And as a new investor, especially in dividend growth world, I think most people fall into this because everyone has their heroes, or not even heroes, but people that they will look up to. And Buffett is probably up there, and everyone knows he's investing in dividend companies, which probably leads them on to blogs. And if they search in European dividend companies, they're going to land on your blog as the number one European dividend growth blog out there. They're going to see what you're investing in. I think it's only natural in the beginning to, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. Let's start there. But over time, you start to evolve and have your own ideas. You start disagreeing with some of your ideas and start to evolve into your own. And I think it's a natural journey. But I think if you're investing 2, 3, 4 years and you're still copying someone else, then you're being lazy, in my opinion. You need to start
you're spot on.
yourself. Yeah.
Because my blog is really there to inspire others. I want to show that it's possible, also as a European. And for that, you need to know a little bit about some things. So that's why I have some blog articles with, the Noble 30, the best UK dividend stocks and such, because it saves time for people to scan through everything. But these are just inspiration ideas. Get started. Yeah, but also like how to pay down debt first, as an example. All these kinds of things are on there to inspire.
Yeah.
So I think what is next level is more our premium service here with ISIT, where we are focused more centered around the dividend safety. But still, I mean, beyond that, people would still need to really... It's more about saving time then, but still people should do their own homework still after that, because, we may be wrong. Really simple. And if you're losing money, it's your accountability. It's your money, not my money. Yeah, I'm not the one that pushes the buy button on there on the other end. And I think that's really important. Pushing this buy button comes with responsibility and with accountability.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And then for me, then one of the biggest lessons I've learned is consistency. And we see that in actually recording the podcast, because we make a commitment to do it every week. You mentioned it last week. I think we've missed maybe 2-3 weeks max over the 200 episodes. But consistency in your investing. And I'm not quite sure if I would have been as consistent if I didn't have the podcast, if I'm honest. Because maybe there'll be months where I say, I'll hold back this month and I'll look for undervalue next month or so on. This podcast is probably, and the blog and now the newsletter has held me accountable. On our newsletter, we share what we buy and what we sell every week. So it does hold you accountable. But looking at your portfolio, looking at the Canadian dividend investor, looking at the dividend guy, Ian Lopuk, all sharing their journeys, and they all had one thing in common. They were all, and Russ, we forgot about Russ. We didn't mention Russ earlier, but they're all consistent, all very consistent. And you can see over time, the effects of compounding takes over and you're all happy.
True. True. And it's interesting that you say that, because you're talking about consistency in this podcast, but this podcast actually helps me getting through the boring middle. Yeah, because we've had questions about it. And if you start investing, you discover it. Like, it's one of the biggest discoveries in my life, actually. How stupid this is. A dividend. Yeah. A growing dividend. Like, wow, eureka. But then you start reading books, you start reading blogs, you're really in this consuming everything you can. But at a certain moment, you know all the stuff, to your point, after 3-4 years. And then slowly, let's say after 5-6 years, the boring middle starts. And then having a blog or having a podcast really helps. It helps you having a routine. To your point, it helps you staying disciplined in your investing. And it really allows me to stick to my plan. I think you see this sometimes, that people start shifting strategies after a while. Then they say like, dividend grow investing is not for me. Is it? Or is it just the lack of patience? Yeah, that I don't know. I mean, I can't judge, honestly, but it's very tempting in the boring middle, I think, to also switch strategy, to spice it up a little bit here. But actually, I think this does more harm than good to your portfolio if your goal is still the same, retiring early.
Yeah. I feel like it would have been easier pre-social media times, because not everything is in your face. I feel like social media puts everything out there. Everything is nearly on high speed, high octane. Everything is bigger, better, faster. You look at some of the portfolios that people are posting, they're big numbers. And it's hard when you sit there and you start and you have a small portfolio and you earn €100 a year, and someone else is earning 100,000. You automatically want to try and catch up, and you do some stupid things. And I was caught up in that. And I remember we sat down to do our goals at the start of the year, and I had put option income there. And you didn't say not do it or anything like that. You just said, be careful. Be careful with it in your own Dutch way. But it turned out to be true, because I got burnt. I still have Wish and Solo in my portfolio, but it's all part of trying to accelerate that process rather than just sitting back and letting the dividends work over time and being patient. My lack of patience brought me into chasing not high yield dividend stocks, but high yield option income, and it burnt me. So yeah, one of my biggest, actually the main lesson that I learned over this is to stick to my strategy, stick to the plan, and stick to investing in dividends only during this time when I'm accumulating. I don't need to get there any faster. I have a plan. I had a 10-year plan. I don't need to do it in 3-4 years. So I can just sit back and let the dividends.
But that's interesting that you say that, because what I sometimes notice in my personal environment, that many people get jealous or something like that. Well, I don't really have that. I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with me. But what I have mostly is that I get inspired and that I feel respect. Whoa, this person is able to get there, Yeah. Of course, when I see this discipline, not when I see like what you sometimes see on social media, those scammers that are even posting fake portfolios. But I have deep respect, for instance, for what Ian Loppuch does. I mean, he's grinding it. Videos each week, investing. He's really grinding it. And I can only have respect for that. And jealousy actually never got to me like that. I of course, sometimes I'm jealous, but I'm more jealous on people that have luck more than wisdom. Because then I think sometimes like, oh, I wish like to, just inherit 500,000 or something like that. Why am I not in such a privileged situation? Yeah. But that usually lasts for a minute, and then I think again, no, I'm self-made. I'm more proud on that.
Yeah. I'm quite similar. I don't feel jealousy of anyone. I'm actually quite secure and happy in my surroundings, my life, my family, and my wife and kids have a lot to do with that. So I'd never look at someone's portfolio and go, "Oh man, they've got 1 million," and I've only
exactly.
This. I agree. It's jealousy can be something that can destroy you.
Exactly. Yeah, and another thing that I really learned via the podcast is that you can learn actually a lot from your mistakes, but also from others. So, for instance, when a dividend cut happens, what do you do? What I did in the past was like, maybe the share price will recover after that. And let's, for instance, you bought at 100, it goes down to 80, dividend cuts, it gets to 60, you think like, it should be able to get back to 100 again. And then you keep holding on to the shares all the time. And I had to learn now, and I do this nowadays, that I actually already start most of the times recently selling before the dividend cut happens. Just taking my loss, deploying the money elsewhere. I learned that if you're quick, you usually don't lose too much capital. And you can still usually get the same yield back, as an example, so that you don't lose dividend income. But if you hang on to it, usually, and there are statistics about this, usually the dividend cutters just continue to go down for quite some time.
Yeah. And what I've learned on that side of it is usually, not always, but usually the signs are there that the dividend will be cut.
Yeah.
Maybe Disney's the only one offhand that I can think of that just cut it that I didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
But usually there are signs that they will be cut. So it's a big lesson for me, similar to you, where I try and now be quick to sell before the dividend cut. And actually, you have to know what you own and have a plan. And for each of my companies, I'm very aware what the dividend safety is. Energas, I didn't expect them to cut it, for example, because of management, but I owned Orange.
Energas was a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. But I owned Orange, for example, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had cut it. And my plan was to buy them and sell them at a price. So I have a clear plan of what to do now. I know before I buy the company, if they cut a dividend, this is what I'm going to do. It helps.
Good. Yeah, for me, this was kind of the main learnings that I had over the podcast. And I think these learnings really allow me to be more consistent in dividend growth investing. And this consistency is key, right? So when I started back in 2014, I just made this template, this sheet that I share as a template on my blog about the early retirement calculator. I just calculated at a yield of 3.25% at the time of deploying the money, and the 6% dividend growth with this saving rate. It will take me so long to get retired.
Yeah,
I'm on that plan and I don't deviate too much from that. And I think this plan and sticking to it, and then having the podcast to let me go through the learning curve so that I hit those numbers, because it's not easy. It's really what gets me there. I'm quite convinced now that it gets me there. And I don't know, I should look up the sheet, whether it's like 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. It doesn't really matter. In my mind, I'm already financially independent.
That must be like a liberating feeling to have that, just to say, in my mind, I'm there.
Yeah, because in my mind, it's just a matter of time. I know now that I've got the routine in place, the behaviors in place, so I feel very confident about that. Hey, and if something happens, if I have a health issue and I need to pay more or something like that, okay, let it be in 5 years. It's not like I have a poor job. No, I've got a really good job, and it's not even clear whether I will at day one stop with my job. I don't think so, actually, because what I learned also from people that are retired, it's not easy to be, let's say, actually retired. So most people, they come to the conclusion it's about financial independence, and then you choose work that maybe doesn't require you to earn so much money to provide for your family, because you don't need to do that anymore. You have already dividend income, so you're more liberated in the work you choose.
Yeah.
But none of them are just sitting at home and watching telly all day.
It's like ex-Berlinger that was on a couple of weeks ago. Gave him the freedom to do that. Not necessarily stop working, but gave him the choice and the freedom, and actually to take a path that he may not have taken if he didn't have that money behind him. So
Exactly.
But hey, we've got quite a few listeners' questions, so we might jump into them. And a few of them, as you would expect, are around the 200 episodes, so we'll start with those ones.
Yeah.
And Centrino has asked us, looking back at all these episodes, what are the 3 key messages or errors that you would like us to remember?
Bankers are wankers. You can't borrow conviction. It's all about the dividend safety, baby.
Can't argue with that. We got a question from Yadida. And he is, what is one thing you know about dividend investing you wish you told yourself when you first started this podcast?
You can't borrow conviction. It's really the one.
Yeah, for me, can't borrow conviction, but look for quality balance sheets.
Yes.
That's my biggest takeaway. Balance sheet, balance sheet, balance sheet. David has asked us, right, perhaps a recap about your investing journey. What did the 200 episodes give to this? Did you incorporate something into your evaluation method, your mindset, or was it ever your goal to have thousands of members and listeners?
We never had a goal of having thousands of members here and listeners. Never, ever. We just wanted to be every time a little bit moving forward. And forward means like having more people listening to the podcast, because our primary goal is really to reach as many people as possible, to inspire them on taking their matters into their own hand regarding to their wealth, because at least I feel very strongly that our European society is not set up for what our grandparents are enjoying right now. When you think about incorporation, I mean, we just spoke about the lot already, but I think, I mean, you just learn over time, and it goes slowly. But I think like what I just mentioned about the dividend safety. Yeah, it's more and more about dividend safety than anything else, not about turnaround plays, these kinds of things.
Yeah. I think in terms of the thousands of members and listeners, we've always agreed not to sell our soul to the devil, and we have been given lots of opportunities to affiliate or partner with things that didn't fit the bill for us or our listeners, and most importantly our listeners. So we've stayed true to ourselves. So our goal is not to have 1 million people just for the sake of it. We want to have 1 million community members that are learning from us and learning from each other.
Exactly.
Okay. And then another part of that question is, do you expect a bigger correction in the market, or are you more optimistic about 2024 and beyond?
I don't know. I'm not so into macro. Generally speaking, I'm just worried about how the world is evolving with the geopolitical tensions, the Russia-Ukraine war in my backyard here, and what this may do maybe to my wealth. But other than that, I can't predict the stock market. I've been mostly wrong about this when I thought about it.
We've been predicting a market crash since COVID.
Yes.
And we've been wrong every single time. I know we've had flash crashes, but nothing
exactly
of what we expected. So yeah, it's hard to say.
They say it's one of those famous investors that famously said, people have lost more money waiting for a correction than in the correction itself.
Yeah. Okay. And Simon has said, like Munger to Buffett, is there a lesson or piece of advice that you have learned from each other over the 200 episodes? Yeah, it's quite easy. Stick to dividends, boys and girls. I remember you telling me to be careful. So that was one piece of advice or lesson that I had learned from you at that time.
Yeah, I didn't prepare for this question, but what I think I learned most from you is all this knowledge about the companies behind it. You really have a lot of engineering knowledge. So if I hear you talking about the products and such, I don't really have that. Yeah, I have it a bit more in IT, but I think that's really a skill that really helps you, I think, in your investment decisions. And that's what I appreciate a lot.
Tim has asked us, when you are both happily retired old men or young men in your slippers, watching the dividends roll in, do you think you'll still be recording every Friday night with vodka shots?
Maybe, well, vodka shots, we're not doing that every Friday night, full disclosure. We do it only when we have something to celebrate, which is not too often as well.
Yep.
So I don't want to bring up the suggestions that we're a bunch of alcoholics here. But you know what? Remember the episode with Chuck Carnival? From Fast Graphs? He's like in his mid-70s or somewhere. He had a lot of joy doing this.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't mind sitting with you being 80 talking about dividend growth investing.
I think it'll actually be easier because at the moment we're hectic and all rush and working.
Family life, kids, everything.
I mean, you're retired. It might not necessarily be every Friday night. It could be Monday, it could be Tuesday. We have the freedom to decide what day we record.
Exactly.
I can see us doing this every week for a long time. You pronounce that name. You're good at it.
Utdelningskontrolleren. This is like dividend control.
Yeah, dividend control. Honest answer only. Do you think, or did you think you would make it to 200 episodes?
I never thought about it. So, I mean, ask me now about 500. I don't think about such things. I just look forward every weekend to meet with you and make a podcast. I mean, I know it's really awkward. And yes, we sit once a year together to have a bit of a plan. But the plans are here like, okay, where do we want to spend our time on? What kind of topics? What to do? Also, out of this sitting together came the idea of having a premium newsletter because we know there's an ask for it, right? But it comes then with a commitment. So the question was, can we commit to it? These kinds of things. But we're not in the... And then I would recommend this to others as well, because I was in the past always at work goal setting. And then I read a book really about that. And I really think like that. It's not so much about goal setting. It's more about every time wanting to do something better, to be a bit better than the time before. And that works the best for me. And of course, a goal setting is more for me visionary. Like we want to be there for Europeans specifically, although our most listeners are from America, but that's only because America is one big country and not 52 countries. But I'm just driven by the fact that I would love to liberate people, not being locked up in this false illusion of getting a retirement, which over the last decade, you lost 20% of purchasing power. That's what's driving us. And then getting a step closer to that each time we've chosen the path of dividend growth investing to talk about on podcast. That's what's driving me, not a goal.
Okay, Einstein has asked us, what are the 2 stocks you would buy right now as a cornerstone in a new portfolio?
In a new portfolio, I think as a European, knowing the stock well, definitely Ahold Delhaize. Okay. I would, and I leave the second one to you.
So I was going to pick 2 different ones. But sticking on European, I would go Siemens.
Yes. Another one?
The other one was American-based, but it was Microsoft.
Okay. I would, Johnson & Johnson, not at the moment due to the increased pipeline risk. Yeah, Microsoft, still expensive.
Yeah, I'm ignoring. I'm ignoring valuation just as a.
Okay. No, then Microsoft. I agree. Yeah.
RMS has asked us, what is too big of a position in an individual stock and sector?
Well, he says like he tries to diverse as much as possible with 4% of a stock maximum and 10% is sector. That's pretty much what I do as well. I think what is too big of a position, RMS, is when you can't sleep well at night.
Yes, that was going to be my answer. Yes, if you're uncomfortable, because I really think, and this caught me in the past, and I think I've mentioned this last week when you were looking at my portfolio. Shell grew to my number 1 position, but it would be even bigger if I had more money at the time. But also around that time, I was looking at diversification because you're reading about all this, and I always try to balance each of my sectors at the time. But what I since realized is I'm in the accumulation phase, so it's only natural that one is going to outweigh the other at some point. But eventually, over time, when I'm retired or get close to retirement, I want them to balance out. But yeah, I think once you stop sleeping well at night, that's when you're too much.
Definitely.
And the second question is it better to buy one time a month or spread it out so you can maximize use of opportunities?
I mean, that's personal, but what I would always try to choose is the one that costs you the least, because fees are there, and also watch out for hidden fees when you're buying fractional shares or something like that, because then the fee might be in the spread that you pay. So I would just take the cheapest option.
Yeah, but you look at it, right? We're retail investors that are using our salary to invest. So that's why it's monthly.
Yeah.
Some people are not in that position. They might have a more privileged position where they have a lump sum, so it might make more sense. But you will find out pretty quickly if you're doing a once-off investment where your conviction lies. Because
Exactly.
it's easier to get it wrong when you're doing it monthly. So, but I do it monthly because I have to, not because of any other reason. I have to do it that way. Alex has asked us, how do you evaluate the quality of the pipeline in big pharma?
And I think it's also a follow-up over our Pfizer thing, right? So there are two things. You look at historical performance. You look at recent acquisitions. Many companies, they have like 40 to 50% of their pipeline based on partnerships. It's just really difficult. You need to, in the end, if you really deeply want to understand the pipeline, so I'm talking about not the product portfolio, but the pipeline, so potential future products. You need to look, for instance, at the rate of success, but you also need to understand what is in the portfolio and preferably the science behind it. And that's just really hard. And that's why for many people, pharma is on the too hard pipeline. Yeah. And I look at the pipeline, therefore, not at small caps or biotech companies. I look at the big pharma, like for me, AbbVie as an example is good. Because you see what their track record is, you see how they are investing in things, but also Novo Nordisk, I just did a deep dive on it. You know what they still have in the pipeline. So pipeline is not only new drug discovery. Pipeline is also like, okay, we have this Wegovy, yeah, okay, and now because this is it's now for this disease, let's also register it for other diseases. That's also pipeline. So can they have this multi-purpose strategy? Can they go from an IV? Can they go to a pill? All these kinds of things, the traditional ones, that's all in the pipeline as well. Usually you need to see a few recent products that are like bangers, right? Blockbusters, and then the pipeline comes after it. So I hope it helps.
Pharma is difficult for that reason. Pulkit has asked us, this is probably a personal finance question. However, investor rules tend to focus on paying down debt over investing. Would you include 0% credit on this, considering you could put that away into dividend stocks or your savings?
That depends on whether the 0% credit is forever. For instance, if you have now this buy now, pay the rest later, for instance, let's say you have you want to buy something, let's say a car, 30K, pay 15K now in cash and the other 15K after 12 months. If you do that, and that's 0%, right? It's just an offer to make you buy this car. If you do that, you need to be able to pay that 15K in the next 12 months. Otherwise you get a high penalty with an interest rate behind it. So for me, there's only one good debt, and that's probably a mortgage. That's the only debt that makes sense, because it's way too expensive to buy a house in cash for any of us. Usually it's like 30 years of paying it down. But with this also, try to not have it maybe at the first buy that you ever do, maybe 30% of your salary, but make sure it gets really quickly below 25% of your salary, and hopefully at a certain moment to a level that you feel comfortable with. So I have on purpose still some mortgage, but that's for two reasons. One is I've got too much money in real estate because of that, because too much wealth, and we have a war going on in our backyard. And secondly, because of that, my interest rate is also decent, and I think that with that money that I have left, I can make a better return on the stock market in the long run. So I just let the inflation make my mortgage debt become less and less and less. But any other debt for me is not a debt that I would like to have. I will pay it off even at 0%. And I don't believe there are 0% credits for the next 30 years. So yeah.
Good. Marcus has asked us, he's made the mistake of relying too heavily on his domestic Finnish dividend stock market. Now it's pretty much a rule, and it's a number one rule, is clear your portfolio of Finnish businesses and replace them with pretty much anything else. However, there are some forestry related companies that do occasionally do well occasionally. And I suppose his question is there any Finnish companies that we have ever looked at or considered in the future?
Oh, I forgot the name, but I've been looking into the telecommunications one. It has an A in it. Lisa or something like that. I've been looking into that one a few times. But telecom businesses, I mentioned also last week with KPN. Nah, not for me. Not for me. But if you have any recommendations, Marcus, of a few Finnish stocks that you want me to look into, I'm always open to that. It's a country where I don't hold anything yet, and I wouldn't mind being this guy. Like, you have those people that have a passport and they want to have a stamp from each and every country in the world in there. Yeah. I wouldn't mind to have as many stamps from European companies in my portfolio, but more as a collector's item, not really as a strategy.
Like a stamp, just
like one stock from Finland, one from Norway, one from Sweden, one from Romania, one from Latvia.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, and Marcus has also asked us about the loyalty dividend that French companies pay out. Do you know how that works again, and what is your favorite French dividend payer?
So, generally speaking, you need to register your share, which is not easy. Yeah, so you need to register your share because most of our shares are held by a custodian. Yeah, so that's the first step. You need to prove ownership, that you own the share. So you need to have a certificate probably of that. Then you need to register it. And then I think after 2 years holding it or some 4 years holding it, you will get a 10% bonus dividend on. So if the dividend is, let's say, 3%, you will get 3.3. So that's how it works, and there are a few of those companies that do this. Now, if you ask me what my favorite French dividend payer is, it must be Louis Vuitton. I mean, L'Oréal as well, but somehow, as long as Bernard Arnault lives, it will be Louis Vuitton. He really inspired me as a CEO.
Yeah, he's the richest man in the world for a reason.
Yeah.
Derek has asked us, Novo Nordisk is now the biggest company in Europe, but that's not really news. Do you think people are sleeping on the stock and the effects of GLP-1 weight loss and diabetes medication? You wrote an article on this, so you know this, but he's asking basically based on their pipeline with diabetes, the medications, is this a buy right now and a hold for decades?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It depends on your growth prospects, I would say. So I don't want to answer that question for that reason, because I don't want to suggest about the pricing here, because I would Derek to really figure that out himself. But let's say like that. What I really like about this GLP-1 is that firstly, it's not just for weight loss or diabetes too. It's now also being looked at from a kidney disease point of view. So it seems to be a bit this miracle drug that has multi-purpose, which is like really hitting the jackpot. Secondly, it's still just scratching the surface of the global population in this with obesity. So I think there's still a lot of room for growth. But it has some hurdles as well that it needs to overcome. For instance, healthcare insurance, reimbursements.
Yeah. So not quite answering the question, is it a buy or hold? It depends on your growth, basically.
Yeah, it depends on his growth forecast, and then he can model it and whether he feels comfortable with it from a PE point of view. It's of course a multiple that usually scares people away.
Christian has asked us, do you only invest through single purchases or also with a savings plan? And in general, what is your opinion on savings plans?
So do we mean with a saving plan here, saving account?
I would say so, yeah.
No, my savings account is maxed out unless if I buy a car soon, then it will be not anymore. But so my general rule is pay off all your debt that's not a mortgage, at least a high interest rate debt, which is more than 4% or something like that. When you have done that and you really have little debt left, then start thinking about investing. I mean, you can start investing for already earlier, but that's more like to get into the game, to get a feeling for it, but focus on that. Once you have that done, make sure you have a buffer on your savings accounts that you can pay for this big expense that you may have, that you can pay for the fact if you will be without a job. And then start mostly investing. Yeah, so that's how I look at it. A savings plan would be maybe more for the kids, but then why not invest for the kids if you have an 18 years horizon?
Yep. I agree. Anders has asked us about your plans to reach FI. How's it going?
It's going well.
Yeah, I can tell you I'm about 20% of the way, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm I think 64, 65 now. And what's the nice thing is the compounding is in the tail end.
Yeah, you're on that little vertical side there. So when it goes up like that, you're on that vertical side. It's nice. Marcien has asked us, what are your thoughts on stocks like XTB? It's a Polish, fast-growing, high-dividend broker company.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So it's a very popular stock at the moment on the Polish market, what Marcin refers to. I mean, the question is not so much about the fact that it's a high yield dividend growth stock. It's more a question like, do you believe in stockbrokers, these low cost brokers? You know what I see? Every other year there comes a new low cost broker. They win millions of customers. Then there is they get some. I said they either get acquired. I've seen that with Alex by Bing, then Bing by Saxo Bank, or now the Hero. But after a while, they start raising prices. So they lock you in. By that time, after 5-6 years, your portfolio is of value. Then they start introducing all kinds of fees, and there you are. I see it over and over and over again, because in the end, those companies will need to earn money after some time. I know they've been earning a lot with CFDs, but also from these kinds of portfolios, they will either want to switch you to CFDs where the big money is for them, or they want you to become a trader so that they get all the fees and the commissions, or they will introduce just a maintenance fee. Either way, they will raise prices at a certain moment. Now, the question is, would you like to be on the investor side then? I don't know. I don't feel that this is a sustainable business model where I feel like 20 years from now, my money will be better off than where it's today. 20 years ago, we hardly had the internet.
Yeah, and a lot can change. A lot can change in 20 years. It's a tough one. These further questions he's asking that. Do they tend to cut dividends then after the growth stops, do you think?
I don't know, because I don't have a lot of reference. I mean, I've not been checking Saxo Bank and all of these, what they have been doing with dividends. I can't tell you.
Okay, Richard has asked us about your bullishness on oil and gas. Does that extend to Enbridge?
So I don't know Enbridge too well, so I can't tell you. I'm bullish on oil and gas. I put a picture today also on socials that shows, like, according to the predictions, it will be flat oil and gas going forward, but not declining as many people are hoping for. And I mentioned, like, hey, it's up to you to decide whether you want to join the free cash flow party or not. And that's how I think about it. But, you know, there are dozens of oil and gas stocks, and Enbridge is this one that we hear sometimes. I know I looked into it 2 or 3 years ago when it was yielding a lot. I just don't remember anymore. I would really need to dive into my notes, and I don't even know where I have them for this company. So I can't say anything meaningful.
Okay, and Thomas has asked us about Vici. So he's currently looking for a new company to buy, but he is finding it hard because it is quite an expensive market out there, he's saying. So that has led him to Vici because they seem relatively cheap. So the price to funds from operation is 11.2, dividend yield close to 6. So his question is there anything I'm missing which makes it priced so low? Can it be their debt? One, their debt is well spread out. So I don't think you have any major debt owing on that for the next 4 to 5 years. Their growth history does look good. The resilience to a crisis. So you just look at COVID, they're the only real estate investment trust that had 100% of their rents paid to them. And how the casinos do during recessions. So I don't know about your average casinos, but Las Vegas tends to do well during oil markets because you have all types there, high rollers. Obviously, not all recessions are created equal. So I can't speak about future, but look, I'm very bullish on VG. I think you're right. They are high growing. They are expanding. They are diluting a lot of shares actually to fund some of their acquisitions, but they are making some nice acquisitions and moving outside of Las Vegas as well. So I am relatively bullish on them. I don't think you're missing a whole lot, but as you said, you can't borrow conviction. But I can tell you they are probably my fourth or fifth largest position, and I'm still buying them. So I'm quite bullish on them.
Nice.
Okay. So there we go. All the questions are done. Thanks so much for all our questions over the last 200 episodes. As we said, we do learn a lot from these. We do appreciate every one of these, and we appreciate all our listeners. So thank you for sticking by us, and we will see you all again next week. Remember, both of us at Dividend Talk are not certified financial specialists through formal education. We are just two guys sharing our journey for inspiration and entertainment purposes. Hence, this is not investment advice. Although we do our best, we can't promise that the information discussed is always correct, nor appropriate for you or anybody else. We always recommend that you do your own due diligence and be accountable for your own choices. As we always say, you can't borrow conviction from others. Last but not least, by listening to our podcast, you agree to hold us harmless from any ramifications, financial or otherwise, that occur to you as a result of acting on information provided in this podcast.